My fiancé invited my abusive twin brother behind my back and tried to surprise me at the wedding. I'm 28 years old and got engaged to my girlfriend 26F a few months ago after 3 years of dating. We were supposed to get married 2 days ago. Before the engagement, my girlfriend was an ordinary, pretty easygoing person, but since she put on the ring, she has become a controlling, stubborn person who doesn't want to listen to what I have to say. She planned the whole wedding without considering my opinion at all, and invited anyone she wanted, even my guests, including old friends who hadn't spoken to me for years. I told her many times not to invite them because it would embarrass everyone, but she insisted that everyone who knew me needed to be invited. In the end, I gave up and let her have her way, hoping that she would just go back to being herself after the wedding. She has always been very controlling, even before I met her. This is what my friend told me, who introduced me to her. But I didn't realize it would be this bad. She needs to be in control at all times, and what she says must be done, otherwise she will go crazy over it. I put up with it for weeks before the wedding because I really loved her, but then she did something absolutely unforgivable. A few months ago, when we were making the guest list, my fiancé asked me about my sister. I was a little shocked because after a few months of dating, I had told her very clearly that I had lost contact with my sister 10 years ago and had not had any contact since then, and I wanted to keep it that way. When she saw the many family photos hanging on the wall, she of course asked me who the identical girl was standing next to me in all my childhood photos. I had to tell her that my estranged sister, my twin sister 28F, and I had cut ties 10 years ago due to an event that changed my life. My sister and I were not friends growing up, although it is easy to be fooled by the photos because we look like two happy children, constantly hugging and smiling, but that was only for our parents. Behind the scenes, we often fought over every little thing. Not even the cute sibling rivalry that most people think of now. Deep down, we didn't love each other, we outright hated each other and did our best to outdo each other. It wasn't until we were in high school that I finally did better than her, and she was furious about it. She refused to even look at me for a few days after that. It didn't matter to me. I felt like I had completely defeated her. What I didn't expect was that I was wrong. School, I ended up with better grades than her. She was furious about this and refused to even look at me for a few days after that. I didn't care about it. I felt like I had completely defeated her. But I didn't know that the worst was yet to come. A few weeks later, we were supposed to find out which universities we had been accepted to. My sister and I were both valedictorians, so we expected to be accepted by all the colleges we applied to. My first choice was Yale and hers was Princeton. I hadn't even considered applying to Princeton, simply because I didn't want to go to the same place as her if she went there. But my friends convinced me to apply at the last minute, because I couldn't base my future on such a trivial matter as whether my sister went to the same place. It was time for us to let go of this kind of stupid competition, so I applied. I had never applied to Princeton before, and I even teased her about it at dinner, so when I changed my mind and finally applied, I kept quiet about it, because after I had treated the matter so dramatically, it would be very embarrassing to go back on my word. What's worse, my sister also said that she hadn't applied to Yale for similar reasons, probably as revenge. But I don't think she would go back on her word anyway. In the end, I got accepted to both schools, and my sister did get accepted to Columbia, but Princeton rejected her. This was a huge blow to her because since senior year, she had talked about nothing but going to Princeton. I could tell that once she found out I got accepted, it was only going to get worse. And I was proven right. I was going to keep it a secret because I wasn't going and my sister didn't need to know. I wasn't trying to offend her, but I just didn't want any extra drama before I went off to college. But I guess my parents already knew. They probably had read our emails. Anyway, my mom decided to throw us a surprise party that afternoon. The cake had all the colleges' names on it, written in icing. I had no idea about any of this. If I had, I might have tried to stop it. When my sister saw that the cake said Princeton, she laughed at me and said I hadn't even applied. But I guess she could tell from my face that I hadn't. She started yelling at me, saying I had ruined her life and taken her future. I tried to explain that I didn't even know her, that I didn't mean to do that to her, but considering our history of rivalry and hostility, it was hard to believe. Although I felt bad about what had happened, after a while she finally seemed to lose her motivation and stormed out of the house in tears. I sat in the living room while my parents told me that they were tired of our constant fighting, and that we both needed to grow up. They couldn't be blamed because they had done their best to repair our relationship, but we had seemed to hate each other since birth, so they had given up and let us do our own thing in high school. I decided to take my parents' advice, so that my sister and I could at least be polite to each other. 15 minutes after she left, I went out to look for her, because most of the guests had already after my sister's outburst. It was already dark outside, and I couldn't see my sister. I tried to call out her name, but before I could figure out what was going on, I felt a heavy object hit the back of my head, and then I fell to the ground. After that, I can only remember screaming for help in agony, and then I fainted. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital room with a bandage around my wrist. When I woke up, my parents told me that my mentally ill sister had been waiting outside for me to come out, and when I called out her name, she hit me over the head with a shovel and then stomped hard on my left wrist, which is why it was dislocated. I could hardly believe what they said because although my sister and I had many disagreements, I could not imagine doing such a crazy and depraved thing to her. Not just to her, but to anyone. My parents had begged me not to sue my sister, so I didn't, but I never saw my sister again, and I never even asked my parents about her. I don't know which university she went to, or where she went after that. My parents sent her away, and I never asked because I knew they were still in touch with her. They never mentioned who they were going to visit when they went away for the weekend, but I knew they were going to see my sister. I never resented them for it, because it was the best way they could have kept us away from each other. Because after we recovered, we obviously brought out the worst in each other. I went to university, but because I had missed a few weeks, my grades didn't satisfy me. Besides that, I often had migraines from the head injury, and the lump on the back of my head was a constant reminder of what my sister had done to me when I was angry. Needless to say, I was very unstable that year and had to undergo treatment to find myself again. 10 years have passed, and I continue to live my life. My parents and I never talk about my sister, and my family doesn't talk about her either. I'm sure they still keep in touch with her, but they're very discreet about it and never mention her in front of me. So when my fiancé asked about her, I told her that we hadn't invited her, and that I thought the discussion was over. I never told her what really happened, but I don't think I should have. To be honest, we haven't spoken for over 10 years, so that should have been enough for her to understand that I definitely don't want my sister at the wedding now or ever. She should have respected that, but she started pestering me about it, and it didn't stop for days until I got angry with her and told her that if she ever mentioned my sister again, I would call off the whole wedding. That seemed to shut her up for a while, but 2 days later on our wedding day, I realized what she had done behind my back on our wedding day. I was standing in front of the priest, waiting for my fiancé to walk down the aisle. The music started, the bridesmaids began to walk, and that's when I noticed my sister walking down the aisle with one of my friends, hand in hand. She looked as confused as I felt, and even my sister looked genuinely overwhelmed. I was completely lost for a few seconds, not really knowing what was happening. My fiancé finally walked down the aisle, looking very happy and smiling. But I felt nothing but anger and betrayal. I knew it was her doing and couldn't believe she would do something like this at our wedding. I felt completely blindsided, so of course I wasn't particularly thrilled, and most of my guests could understand why I had a terrible expression on my face when my sister finally stood opposite me, still wearing a smile on her face. I immediately asked her why my sister was there, as I had clearly told her not to invite her under any circumstances. She told me she didn't want to discuss it and just wanted to get married first, but that was obviously not going to happen. So I told her we had to discuss it now, and she admitted that she had told my parents that I had said I wanted to reconcile with my sister before getting married, and that was how she had convinced them to give her my sister's address and contact details. She told me that she had gone to a lot of trouble to convince them, just to surprise me, and even went so far as to say that she thought it was time we made peace with the past, even though she had no idea what had happened 10 years ago. 10 years ago we had been arguing back and forth for 5 minutes right there, while our guests waited, and finally I realized that arguing about our relationship was pointless. I was fed up and didn't want anything more to do with the woman, so I just walked straight out of the wedding. I heard her calling me to come back, but I ignored her and just kept walking until I reached my car. Then I started the engine and drove until sunset. I couldn't find a decent hotel nearby, so I decided to sleep in the car. During the night I took care of everything on my phone, deliberately ignoring calls and messages from my fiancé and family. Luckily, I had enough petrol to get home the next day. But when I saw my fiancé's car in the driveway, I decided to check into a hotel. It had been 2 days since I hadn't answered my fiancé's calls or texts, and my parents had been trying to contact me, but I wasn't available to them right now. Honestly, I couldn't believe they were stupid enough to think I would suggest getting back together with my sister and believe my fiancé's lies. They should have at least called to make sure that was what I wanted, but they chose to believe it was the biggest surprise I would want at my wedding. I was so angry at my fiancée for what she had done. She had no right to manipulate my parents behind my back and then bring my sister, who I hadn't spoken to in 10 years, to the wedding. She had made a complete mess of things, and if she had respected what I had said hours earlier, none of this would have happened. She sent me a long text saying that she had only found out from my parents yesterday, and that my parents had only told me yesterday how she had found out about something that had happened years ago. After the wedding, she apologized to me and admitted that she should have listened to me when I said I didn't want my sister at the wedding. She also mentioned that my parents and friends were very angry with her for doing such a thing, and that she was reprimanded by everyone. But she added that she thought I should have mentioned the specific details of the serious disagreement between my sister and me, and the exact reason why I no longer spoke to her so that she would not have invited her. I completely disagree with her. Maybe doing so would have helped, but I don't need to explain everything to her. It's a painful memory for me and I don't like talking about it. Besides, when I told her that I didn't want my sister to stay away from me, no one breaks off relations with their sister for 10 years for no reason. She should know how terrible those times were for me. Maybe I'll tell her sometime in the future, but until then she can take my word for it. I definitely won't marry her, but I'm not sure if I should apologize to her. I'm not particularly sorry about it, and if I have to apologize, I should apologize to her, not blame her. What do you think I should say to Ida to apologize? I haven't told my fiancé why I cut off contact with my sister years ago. Update. I've been staying at this hotel for 3 days now. I posted my question yesterday, and I think I was right not to apologize, so I've decided to continue ignoring her. I did talk to my mom this morning though, and as weird and stressful as it was, she told me that she was very sorry for what happened, and that she should have known I never wanted my sister around. She explained to me that my fiancé contacted them a few weeks ago, and tried to convince them for weeks, until they agreed to reveal my sister's information. My fiancé also forced them to promise her that they wouldn't talk to me about it, because she wanted it to be a surprise. In hindsight, they did think they made a stupid decision, and I'm glad they realized that and apologized for it twice. I'm not sure if I'll forgive them yet as I'm in a mixed mood right now, but eventually I guess I will, just not yet. I plan on going home in a few days, but I have to make sure my fiancé isn't there when I get back, as she will obviously be moving out since the house is actually mine. I'll give her enough time to pack and move out, which she kind of deserves anyway. The relationship is definitely over now, and to be honest, I'm just relieved. A few days ago, I also told my fiancée that she needed to move out of the house as soon as possible and gave her 5 days. Today is the 6th day, and I returned to my own house thinking that she had left, because she texted me saying that she would move out today, so I returned home, not expecting to find her waiting for me in the living room. She is very clever, probably parked her car somewhere else to make me think she was gone, and I fell for it. I was really annoyed to see her there, and told her that I really wasn't in the mood to discuss anything right now. Now my fiancé ignored what I said and started rambling on about how she had been worried sick for the past few days, and that I should at least tell her where I was. I don't know why, but somehow my fiancé just thought that despite everything that had happened, we could still resume our relationship and continue from where we had left off, as if she had paused the game or something. When I didn't respond, she went on to say that I had really messed up by involving her in my sister's business, and accused me that I had withheld information that could have put her in danger because she had visited my sister. That was when I lost my temper. I couldn't believe her nerve to pretend that it was my fault, so I told her very bluntly to get out of my house immediately and that we were finished. She seemed a little surprised. I guess she hadn't taken what I said seriously, so she didn't expect me to say it. She wanted to argue with me and looked as if she was about to cry, but tears no longer had any effect on me. I told her she had to leave immediately because I couldn't stand seeing her or hearing her voice. It was driving me crazy. I couldn't stand her nonsense anymore and wanted her to leave forever. I think I must have hit a nerve because she burst into tears on the spot. But I was in such a state of emotional collapse that I didn't bother to comfort her. I just let her go crying, and then I went into the bedroom and locked myself in for a nap. I must have slept for a long time because when I woke up, it was dark outside and my fiancé was gone. I knew she would come back later to collect her things, but now I could finally be alone and have some space to think and process everything that had happened to me that week. Update 3. It's been 3 days since my fiancé left, but she hasn't accepted the fact that we've broken up and calls me every day. I haven't answered any of the calls, but I do feel a little sorry for her. As for my parents, they came by yesterday, apologizing profusely for everything that happened and taking full responsibility. I finally asked them what my sister had been doing all these years, and they told me that after that incident, they sent her to an anger issues rehabilitation center, where she received months of therapy and intensive treatment, because her mental problems were obviously much more serious than mine. After she was discharged, she finally started college, but had to rent an apartment where she lived alone, and my parents visited her on weekends. Since then, she seems much more normal and stable. Over the past 7 years, she and I started working at around the same time. She lives outside the city and runs her own business, which I think is pretty great. After I left the wedding, my sister seemed to realize that she was the one who caused all this, and she immediately left after apologizing to my parents. It appeared that my fiancé had told her that it was just a rehearsal and not a real wedding, but it all seemed so real to her that she looked so confused. My parents also handed me a letter my sister wrote to me, and after they left, I finally opened it and read it. It broke my heart. She apologized for everything I had gone through as a child and teenager and promised that she had changed. Her words were full of regret, and she regretted that we could have been best friends but were now bitter strangers. She said that although she had no hope that we would reconcile anytime soon due to her violent tendencies, she hoped that one day I would be able to forgive her, and that we could be the kind of siblings people wished we were. I was in tears when I read this, and I think I do want that. I'll give myself some time to think about it, and maybe when I'm ready I'll forgive her because I was a child and it was cruel, and because the past few months have really hit me hard, and honestly I just want to rebuild my life and focus on improving my mental state. I'm just waiting for my fiancé to come and get her things so I can block her out completely and move on with my life. I think I've been through enough for one lifetime and I'm done.